The Great Hall at Hampton Court was a spectacle in December 1526. The new rules, the Eltham Ordinances, had just been put in place by Cardinal Wolsey to reform the king's household. But reform did not mean restraint, not at Christmas. The King Henry VIII expected a show. His court was a theater, and dinner was the main performance. Hundreds of people, from the highest nobles to the lowest servants, moved through the stone corridors. In the kitchens, an army of cooks sweated over open fires. Records from the time show the sheer scale of it. Over 1,200 people needed to be fed each day during the 12 days of Christmas. The ovens consumed 600,000 gallons of ale and 100,000 gallons of wine over the year. The centerpiece of the most important feasts was not a turkey. First turkeys were new, strange birds from the Americas, first brought to England only a few years earlier, around 1523. They were an oddity, not yet a tradition. The real showstopper was a swan, or sometimes a peacock. On a cold evening, the procession would begin. Heralds would announce the arrival of the main course. Two servants, straining under the weight of a huge silver platter, would carry it into the hall. On the platter was a swan. It looked alive. Its skin had been carefully removed before roasting. After the bird was cooked, the skin and feathers were meticulously put back on. Its neck was propped up, its wings arranged as if in flight. Sometimes a small piece of cloth soaked in alcohol was placed in its beak and lit, so it seemed to breathe fire. This was not about the taste. Swan is a greasy, tough meat. It was about pure, unadulterated wealth. A swan was a royal bird protected by law. To serve one, you needed permission from the crown. It told every single person in that room that the host was powerful, connected, and rich beyond measure. The bird was a statement. Today, a 25-pound turkey sits in the same spot on our tables. We don't think of it as a statement of power, but it is a direct, albeit more humble, descendant. The tradition of a large, impressive bird as the centerpiece, a focal point for the entire meal, is not a modern invention. It is the echo of a medieval need to display status through food, a practice documented in the feast records of kings like Henry, where the spectacle was just as important as the sustenance. Number 10. The centerpiece bird isn't just a tradition, it's a downgraded spectacle. The year is 1416. Richard de Beauchamp, the 13th Earl of Warwick, is holding a feast. He is one of the most powerful men in England, a trusted commander for King Henry V. The feast is not just a meal. It is a political event. He is celebrating his recent victories in France. The Great Hall of Warwick Castle is packed. Tapestries cover the cold stone walls. A massive fire roars in the hearth. The tables are long wooden planks set on trestles covered with linen cloths. The most important people sit at the high table on a raised platform. Richard sits in the center. The meal has been going on for hours. Course after course has been served. Meat pies, roasted fish, jellies molded into fantastic shapes. But everyone is waiting for the main event. A trumpet sounds. The conversations quiet down. The doors to the kitchen swing open. Two servants enter carrying a massive platter. On it is a peacock. The bird is in full plumage. Its magnificent tail fanned out. Its beak is gilded with gold leaf. It looks as if it could spring to life and strut across the table. This is the show. This is what people will talk about for months. A man named John, one of Richard's household cooks, watches from the side. He has worked for 2 days on this peacock. The process was incredibly difficult. First, his assistants had to skin the bird. This was the hardest part. The skin had to be removed in one perfect piece with all the feathers intact. One tear, and the whole effect would be ruined. They made a long incision down the belly and worked slowly, carefully, peeling the skin and feathers back from the meat. It was a job for steady hands and immense patience. Once the skin was off, it was packed with salt and spices to preserve it. Then John took over the cooking of the carcass. Peacock meat is not good. It's dry and stringy, like an old chicken. His job was to make it edible. He larded it with pork fat, basting it constantly with a mixture of wine, butter, and expensive spices like saffron and mace. The goal was to keep it from turning into leather over the open fire. While the bird roasted, another team worked on the presentation. A wire frame was built to support the bird's neck and tail in a lifelike pose. When the meat was cooked, it was left to cool. And then came the reassembly. John and his team carefully fitted the preserved skin and feathers back over the cooked bird. They stretched it tight, sewing it up along the belly where the first cut was made. The wire frame was inserted. The tail feathers were arranged in their famous fan. A small piece of camphor, a waxy substance, was placed in the beak. Just before it was carried out, a servant would light the camphor. The effect was a wisp of smoke, as if the bird were breathing. No one at the high table really wanted to eat the peacock. The carving of the bird was another piece of theater. A skilled carver would make a few strategic cuts, but most of the meat was for the lower tables or would be used in a pie the next day. The purpose of the peacock was to be seen. It represented Richard de Beauchamp's power. He could afford not just the bird, but the small army of skilled labor required to create this edible sculpture. He could afford to waste time and effort on something so purely for show. Our holiday turkey is the direct descendant of this practice. When Europeans first encountered turkeys in the 1500s, they saw a bird that was big and impressive, just like a swan or a peacock. But it had a huge advantage. It actually tasted good. It was also easier to raise. Turkeys quickly replaced the traditional showbirds on the tables of the wealthy. Over the centuries, as farming methods improved and costs came down, the turkey became accessible to everyone. When we place a huge golden brown turkey in the center of the table, we are reenacting that moment from Richard de Beauchamp's feast. We might not be thinking about status, but the visual impact is the same. It is the centerpiece. It is the thing everyone gathers around. It requires effort and a certain amount of ceremony to carve and serve. It is a spectacle. The difference is that our spectacle is delicious. We have kept the theater of the medieval feast, but replaced the tough, showy bird with one that everyone actually wants to eat. We democratized the spectacle. Number 9, that sweet sauce on your meat is a ghost of Crusader tastes. Let's go to London. Around the year 1390, the city is a maze of narrow, muddy streets. In the kitchens of King Richard II, a team of master cooks is in a state of controlled chaos. One of these cooks is a man named Thomas. He is working on a recipe for the king's dinner. The recipe will eventually be written down in a collection called The Form of Cury, one of the oldest English cookbooks. Thomas is not just cooking for sustenance, he is creating art, and he is practicing medicine as he understands it. He is preparing a dish of roasted capon, a castrated rooster, but he is not just serving it with its own juices. He is making a complex sauce to go with it. He reaches for the ingredients. There is wine, vinegar, and ground ginger. Then he reaches for the most important ingredients: sugar, cloves, mace, and dried fruits like dates and raisins. He is making a sweet and sour sauce, heavily spiced, to pour over the roasted bird. To a modern palate, putting a sugary, fruit-laden sauce on chicken might seem strange, something reserved for specific dishes. For Thomas, it was the height of sophisticated cooking. The medieval European diet was full of these combinations. Meat pies were filled with a mixture of pork, dates, and sugar. Fish was cooked in a sauce of almond milk, saffron, and honey. The line between sweet and savory, which seems so clear to us, was almost non-existent. A feast was a riot of flavors with sweet, sour, and spicy notes all appearing in the same dish. There were 2 main reasons for this. The first was status. Sugar was not a common sweetener. It was an incredibly expensive imported spice brought from the Middle East at great cost. To use sugar lavishly in a main course was like serving gold on a plate. It told the guests that the host was wealthy and worldly. The spices, too, were a sign of immense wealth. The second reason was the influence of the Crusades. For centuries, European knights and soldiers had traveled to the Middle East. They came back with more than just battle stories. They brought back new tastes. The cuisine of Persia and the Arab world was a revelation. It was rich with spices, fruits, and the combination of sweet and sour. Our cooks in Europe began to imitate these flavors, adapting them to the ingredients they had. This taste for the exotic became a hallmark of aristocratic food. Thomas, the cook, also believed he was balancing the body's humors. Medieval medicine was based on the idea that the body contained 4 fluids, or humors: black bile, yellow bile, phlegm, and blood. Each had a corresponding quality: cold, hot, moist, or dry. Illness was caused by an imbalance. Foods were also classified by these qualities. For chicken, for example, was considered moist and warm. To balance it, a cook would add ingredients with opposite properties. The vinegar in the sauce was cold and dry. The sugar and spices were hot and moist. By combining them, Thomas believed he was creating a dish that was not only delicious, but also perfectly healthy for the king. Now think about your holiday dinner. You have a roasted turkey. On the side, you have a bowl of cranberry sauce. It is sweet, tart, and sometimes spiced with cinnamon or orange peel. You might have a ham with a brown sugar and pineapple glaze. You might serve applesauce with a pork roast. These are direct echoes from Thomas's Kitchen. We have compartmentalized the sweet and savory flavors. We serve the sweet sauce on the side instead of pouring it all over the meat. But the fundamental pairing is the same. That spoonful of cranberry sauce on your turkey is a ghost of the Crusades. It is a remnant of a time when sugar was a spice, when Middle Eastern flavors were the peak of fashion, and when your cook was also your doctor. We don't think about humoral theory anymore, but our taste buds still remember. Number 8, your spice cabinet is a relic of a global power struggle. His name is Giovanni. It is the year 1350, and he is a merchant in Venice. His family has been in the spice trade for generations. And Venice is not just a city on the water. It is the gateway to the East. For centuries, it has controlled the flow of spices into Europe. Giovanni's entire life revolves around a few small dried things: peppercorns, cloves, nutmeg, and cinnamon. To us, they are common items in a kitchen cabinet. To Giovanni, they are jewels. They are the source of his city's power and his family's fortune. Let's follow the journey of a single clove. It begins its life on a tree that grows only on a few tiny islands in what is now Indonesia, the Maluku Islands, or the Spice Islands. Local farmers harvest the dried flower buds. A trader from Java buys them. He sails to the port of Malacca, a bustling hub of commerce. There he sells the cloves to an Indian or Arab merchant. The cloves are then loaded onto a larger ship and sailed across the Indian Ocean, dodging pirates and storms. They land in India, where they are sold again. From India, they travel by sea to the Persian Gulf or the Red Sea. If they go to the Red Sea, they are unloaded in Egypt and carried by camel caravan across the desert to the port of Alexandria. This is where the Venetians like Giovanni take over. Venetian ships, protected by the city's powerful navy, are waiting in the harbor. Giovanni's agent in Alexandria inspects the cloves, haggles over the price with the Egyptian sultan's officials, and pays a hefty tax. The cloves are then loaded onto a Venetian galley for the final leg of their journey across the Mediterranean. By the time that clove arrives in Giovanni's warehouse in Venice, its price has multiplied 1,000 times. Every person who touched it along that long, dangerous route took a profit. Giovanni knows the stories that are told about these spices. People believe that cinnamon sticks are collected from the nests of giant birds in Arabia. They think black pepper grows in forests guarded by fiery serpents. These myths, often encouraged by merchants, only add to the mystique and drive up the price. In his warehouse, Giovanni inspects his new shipment. The scent of nutmeg, mace, and ginger is overwhelming. He is not just selling a flavoring. He is selling medicine, perfume, and a ticket to the upper class. A wealthy lord in England or France will buy these spices to show off at his feasts. A pound of nutmeg costs the same as 7 fat oxen. A pound of ginger is worth a sheep. A sack of pepper is literally worth a man's life. Spices are used to pay ransoms and dowries. They are more valuable than gold because they are consumable. You can display your wealth by using them, and then you have to buy more. This trade made Venice a superpower. It funded the incredible art and architecture of the city, but it also created intense rivalry. The city of Genoa was Venice's mortal enemy, and they fought brutal wars for control of the trade routes. Later, nations like Portugal and Spain would try to break the Venetian monopoly by finding a direct sea route to the Spice Islands, a quest that would lead Columbus to the Americas and Vasco da Gama around Africa to India. The entire Age of Exploration was in many ways a fight over spices. When you bake a pumpkin pie for the holidays, you reach for the cinnamon, the nutmeg, the ginger, and the cloves. You probably have all of them in your kitchen. You bought them for a few dollars at the grocery store. You sprinkle them into the filling without a second thought. But what you are holding is the end product of 1,000 years of history. You are holding the reason for wars, the foundation of empires, the motivation for explorers to sail off the edge of the known world. Each fragrant grain of spice is a tiny relic of a brutal, high-stakes global power struggle, a struggle that men like Giovanni lived and died for. Your casual holiday baking is a luxury that would have been unimaginable to even the richest kings of the medieval world. Number 7, your dinner roll used to be your plate. We are in North Wales in the year 1295. Caernarfon Castle is a new, imposing fortress, a symbol of English power. Inside its thick walls, the kitchens are a hive of activity. A baker named Reese pulls a batch of bread from the massive stone oven. He is not making soft, fluffy loaves. He is making trenchers. The dough is simple whole wheat or rye flour, water, and salt. No yeast to make it rise. He bakes it until it is hard and dense. Then he sets the loaves on a shelf. They will not be eaten today or tomorrow. They need to sit for at least 4 days to become properly stale and hard. When it is time for a meal in the great hall, a kitchen boy takes these stale loaves and saws them into thick, rectangular slabs about 6 inches by 4 inches. These are the trenchers. They are not food. They are plates. Each diner, except for the lord and his family who might have wooden or pewter plates, gets a trencher. The server places the slab of hard bread in front of them. The cooks then pile the food directly onto it. Roasted meats, stews, fish. The trencher's job is to soak up the juices, the grease, and the sauces. This prevented the bare wooden table from being ruined. For the duration of the meal, the trencher serves its purpose. People eat the food off the top of it using their fingers and a knife. They might tear off a small piece of a softer bread, called manchette, to sop up a particularly good sauce, but the trencher itself is left alone. It is a tool, an absorbent rectangle of stale bread. What happened to the trencher after the meal was a clear indicator of social status. After the main courses, when the diners were finished, the servants would clear the tables. The trenchers, now soggy with the remnants of the feast, were collected. The trenchers from the high table used by the nobles were often gathered in a basket. These were considered the best leftovers, and they were given as alms, a form of charity to the poor who waited at the castle gates. For someone who was starving, a piece of bread soaked in the rich juices of a lord's meal was a life-saving gift. The trenchers from the lower tables were often just thrown on the floor for the dogs that roamed the hall. For Reese, the baker, this was the life cycle of his product. He spent his days baking bread that was destined to become either charity for the desperate or food for animals. The word trencher comes from the old French verb trancher, which means to cut or to slice. Our word trencherman, meaning someone with a hearty appetite, comes from this practice. So how does this connect to your holiday dinner? Look at the bread on your table. You have soft dinner rolls in a basket. You have stuffing or dressing cooked inside the turkey or in a separate dish. Both of these are descendants of the trencher. The idea of having bread as a fundamental part of the main meal, used to absorb flavors, is a direct continuation. The stuffing is the most obvious link. We take bread, often stale bread, and we mix it with broth, meat drippings, herbs, and vegetables. We are essentially creating a pre-soaked trencher. We have taken the function of that medieval plate and turned it into a dish in its own right. The dinner roll serves a similar purpose, though more refined. We use it to wipe our plates clean, to soak up the last bit of gravy or sauce. We are doing exactly what a medieval diner did, but we do it with a soft, warm piece of bread, and we eat the bread itself. The plate under our food is now made of ceramic, but the roll of bread as the ultimate accompaniment, the absorbent partner to the main course, has not changed in over 700 years. Every time you use a piece of bread to clean your plate, you are giving a nod to Reese the baker and his hard stale loaves that served as the original disposable dish. Number 6, the holiday music in the background was once a live, all-request show. It is Christmas 1250. A man named Arnaut is traveling on a tired horse through the countryside of southern France. He is a troubadour, a professional entertainer. He carries a lute on his back and a collection of poems and songs in his head. He is heading towards the castle of a local lord who is known for his generosity, especially during the festive season. And a feast without entertainment was considered a dull affair, and Arnaut's job was to provide that entertainment. He arrives at the castle and is welcomed into the great hall. The feast is already underway. The hall is noisy, filled with the sounds of conversation, clattering dishes, and barking dogs. Arnaut finds his place near the hearth, where he can be seen and heard. He waits for his moment. After a few courses, the Lord calls for silence and gestures towards him. This is cue. Arnaut is not just a singer. He is a news source, a storyteller, and a comedian. He starts with a song of courtly love, a popular genre. He sings of a noble knight pining for a beautiful, unattainable lady. The ladies at the high table sigh. The knight's nod in appreciation. Then he changes the mood. He tells a story of a great battle, a chanson de geste, or song of heroic deeds. He acts out the parts, his voice rising and falling with the drama of the story. He sings of bravery, honor, and loyalty. But he also has to read the room. If the audience seems bored, he will switch to something lighter. He might tell a fableo, a short, comical, and often rude story about foolish peasants or greedy priests. This gets a loud laugh from the lower tables. He takes requests. A knight might call out for a song about a specific hero. A lady might ask for a poem he composed. He has to be versatile. He is the living embodiment of the evening's entertainment. Yeah, there might be other performers too. A juggler or jongler might toss knives or balls in the air. An acrobat might perform feats of balance. A jester or court fool would wander the hall, telling jokes and playing pranks, often with a level of satire that no one else would dare use. This was the soundtrack to the medieval feast. It was live, interactive, and essential. The music and stories were as much a part of the meal as the food itself. It helped pass the time during the long hours between courses and provided a common cultural experience for everyone in the hall. Today, we also have a soundtrack for our holiday dinners. We might put on a playlist of Christmas carols. We might have a holiday movie playing on the television in the other room. We might have the sound of a football game providing a familiar background hum. We see this as background noise, but it serves the same function as Arnott and his lute. It provides a mood. It creates a festive atmosphere. It fills the silences in conversation and provides a shared cultural backdrop for the event. Even the tradition of caroling has its roots in this. The word carol originally referred to a type of circle dance accompanied by singing. These were not always religious. In the medieval period, carolers would go from house to house, often singing rowdy songs, and would be rewarded with food and drink, like wassail. It was a form of public entertainment, a way for the community to share in the festive spirit. When we turn on our holiday music, we are hiring a modern, invisible troubadour. The songs we play, whether they are religious hymns or secular pop tunes, tell stories and evoke emotions, just as Arnott's songs did. We have replaced the live performer with a recording, but the fundamental need for an auditory component to our feasts, for a soundtrack to our celebration, remains unchanged. The quiet hum of White Christmas in the background is a distant technological echo of a lone man with a lute, singing for his supper in a drafty castle hall. Number 5, your spiked eggnog is the tame cousin of a communal cauldron of drink. The brother Simon is the cellarer of Glastonbury Abbey in England. The year is 1480. It is a cold December, and the abbey is preparing for the 12 days of Christmas. As cellarer, Simon is in charge of all the drink for the monastery. This is a massive responsibility. The monks, their servants, and the many guests who will visit during the holiday season will consume a huge amount of ale and wine. But for Christmas, something special is required. Simon is preparing the wassail. The word wassail comes from the Old English phrase washail, which means be in good health. It was both a drink and a ritual. Simon stands in a large, cool storeroom filled with barrels of cider and ale. He directs 2 lay brothers as they haul a huge cauldron into the center of the room. Into this cauldron, they pour gallons of strong ale. Then they begin to add the other ingredients. They float baked apples called lamb's wool in the mixture. They add a generous amount of sugar, a costly ingredient that the wealthy abbey can afford. Then come the spices. Simon carefully measures out cinnamon, nutmeg, and ginger, which he keeps locked in a special chest. These spices are worth a fortune, and they will transform the simple ale into a festive drink. The cauldron is then heated over a low fire, allowing the flavors to meld together. Later that evening, the wassail bowl will be the center of the celebration. The abbot will take the first drink. He will raise the cup, say, "Ways hail," and the person next to him will reply, "Drink hail," or "Drink in good health." The bowl is then passed from person to person. Everyone in the room, from the highest ranking monk to the lowest servant, drinks from the same communal bowl. This act of sharing the drink was a powerful symbol of community and goodwill. It temporarily broke down the rigid social hierarchies of the time. The ritual was not just confined to the abbey. In the surrounding villages, people would go wassailing. They would carry a bowl of the hot, spiced drink from house to house, singing songs and offering a drink in exchange for a small gift of food or money. They would also wassail the apple trees in the orchards, pouring some of the drink on the roots and singing to the trees to ensure a good harvest in the coming year. It was a boozy, joyous, and deeply communal tradition. Think about the drinks we serve at holiday parties today. We have mulled wine, hot toddies, and spiked eggnog. These are all direct descendants of wassail. Take mulled wine. We start with a base of red wine. We add sugar or honey, spices like cinnamon sticks, cloves, and star anise, and often slices of orange. We heat it gently to let the flavors infuse. This is almost identical to the process Brother Simon used, substituting wine for ale. Our eggnog, a rich mixture of milk, cream, sugar, whipped eggs, and spices like nutmeg, is often fortified with brandy, rum, or whiskey. It is a rich, celebratory drink served only at this time of year. It is our version of the special holiday brew. When we serve these drinks from a large punch bowl at a party, we are recreating the communal wassail bowl. Guests gather around, ladle the drink into their own cups, and share in the festive spirit. While we no longer drink from the exact same cup, the idea of a central shared source of a special holiday drink is a continuation of the tradition. The act of offering a guest a drink as soon as they arrive at your home during the holidays is part of this legacy. It is a gesture of hospitality and welcome, just as offering a sip from the wassail bowl was. Your carefully prepared batch of mulled wine or eggnog is a much tamer, more individualized version of Brother Simon's steaming cauldron, but it comes from the same place, a desire to create a warm, celebratory, and communal experience through a shared special drink. Number 4. The seating chart drama is a medieval power play. It is 1345. Sir Robert is the steward of a large baronial household in England. His lord is hosting a major feast for a neighboring noble. Sir Robert's most important and stressful job is not ordering the food or managing the servants. It is creating the seating plan for the great hall. This task is a minefield of social and political etiquette. One mistake could cause a serious insult, potentially damaging a political alliance or starting a feud. The Great Hall itself is a map of the social order. At one end, on a raised platform called a dais, is the high table. This is where the Lord, his family, and the most important guests will sit. The Lord sits in the center in the largest, most ornate chair. The guest of honor sits to his right, a position of great prestige. The Lord's wife sits to his left. The further away you are from the Lord, the less important you are. But it is more complicated than that. Sir Robert has a long list of guests, and he must rank them precisely. A visiting knight is more important than a wealthy merchant, but less important than a bishop. An older knight might take precedence over a younger one, even if the younger one has a slightly higher title. Sir Robert consults books of etiquette and relies on his own deep knowledge of the complex web of family relationships, feudal obligations, and personal histories. Below the dais, long trestle tables stretch down the length of the hall. This is where the rest of the household and the less important guests sit. Even here there is a strict hierarchy. The knights and squires of the household sit above the salt. A large, often elaborate salt cellar is placed in the middle of the table. Salt was a valuable commodity, and its placement was a crucial social marker. Those above the salt were of higher status. Those below the salt were the junior members of the household, the servants, and anyone of low rank. To be seated below the salt was a clear message about your place in the world. Sir Robert agonizes over his chart. Should he place Baron Fitzwilliam closer to the Lord than Sir John, even though Sir John's wife is the Lord's distant cousin? Where should the abbot from the local monastery sit? Placing him too far from the Lord would be an insult to the church. Placing him too close might offend a noble of higher rank. The entire success of the evening rests on his ability to navigate this social maze. When the guests arrive, they will look for their assigned seat, and that placement will tell them exactly how the host values them. Now, fast forward to your holiday dinner. You are setting the table. You probably do not have a dais or a salt cellar dividing your guests. But the ghost of Sir Robert's dilemma is still there. Who sits at the head of the table? Is it the host? And the oldest family member? The guest of honor? This decision alone is a small reflection of the high table. You think about where to place your other guests. You might put two people who you think will have a good conversation next to each other. You might strategically separate two relatives who tend to argue. You might place a shy guest next to someone outgoing. You might try to sit a new boyfriend or girlfriend next to a friendly family member to make them feel welcome. You are engaging in a modern, less formal, but very real version of social engineering, just as Sir Robert did. The anxieties are similar. You do not want anyone to feel left out or slighted. You want the evening to go smoothly. The placement of each person matters. The shape of the table itself can send a message. A long, rectangular table creates a natural hierarchy, with the heads of the table being positions of importance. A round table, like the mythical one of King Arthur, is more egalitarian, with no single seat being more important than another. The very act of planning where people will sit, of curating the social interactions at your meal, is a direct inheritance from the rigid, high-stakes world of the medieval seating chart. You are, in a small way, the steward of your own great hall. Number 3, your day after turkey sandwich has charitable roots. At the end of a great feast in the 15th century, the tables in the Great Hall are a scene of controlled destruction. There are bones, scraps of bread, and half-eaten pies. To our modern eyes, it looks like a lot of waste. But in the medieval world, very little was truly wasted. The leftovers were an integral part of the feast's economy and its social function. In a large household, a specific person was in charge of this process, the almoner. Let's imagine a man named William, the almoner for the household of a wealthy bishop in Canterbury in the year 1450. His job is rooted in the Christian duty of charity. The word almnir comes from alms, which means giving to the poor. As the servants clear the tables, they do not scrape the leftovers into a bin. They carefully sort them. First, there is the voidie. This was a final course of spices and wine meant to aid digestion. Any leftover spiced candies or wafers from the voidie were highly prized. Then came the main leftovers. The best pieces of uneaten meat, the finest bread, and any untouched pastries were placed into a special basket. This was the alms basket. These were the leftovers from the high table, the food that the Lord and his most honored guests had touched. William the almoner takes charge of this basket. He takes it to the almonry, a specific office or room near the gate of the bishop's palace. Outside the gate, a crowd of the local poor has gathered. They know that a feast means there will be leftovers. William, or one of his assistants, distributes the contents of the alms basket. This act was called the dole. It was a crucial form of social welfare in a time before any government programs existed. It was also a way for the bishop to display his piety and generosity, earning him both social and spiritual credit. The less desirable leftovers, the broken meats from the lower tables, the soggy trenchers, the bones, were not thrown away either. They would be used to make a simple stew or pottage to feed the lowest ranking servants of the household. The very last scraps and bones would be given to the dogs. Every calorie of food was used, distributed according to the same strict hierarchy that governed the feast itself. Now, consider your own holiday dinner. The meal is over. The table is covered with the remains of the feast. There is half a turkey, a good amount of stuffing, some leftover, mashed potatoes and various, side dishes. What do? You do not throw it away. You begin a ritual that is familiar to almost everyone. You get out the plastic containers and foil. You pack up the leftovers. Some of it is for your own household. The next day, you will eat turkey sandwiches, or you will reheat a plate of food. This is the modern equivalent of the household servants eating the pottage made from scraps. You are ensuring your own household is fed for the next few days. But you also pack up food for your guests to take home. You make sure your son has enough to take back to his apartment, or you send a plate home with your neighbor who dropped by. This act of sending guests home with food is a form of the dole. It is a gesture of generosity and hospitality, ensuring that the benefits of the feast extend beyond the single meal. Sometimes this charity is more explicit. Many families will buy an extra turkey or ham to donate to a food bank. Churches and community centers host holiday dinners for the homeless, often funded by donations. These are organized, modern versions of William the Almoner's work at the palace gate. The core principle is identical. The abundance of a feast should be shared with those who have less. So when you are meticulously wrapping a turkey leg in foil for your cousin to take home, or planning what to do with the leftovers for lunch tomorrow. You are participating in a system of food distribution that is centuries old. You are the almoner of your own feast. Number 2, the marathon meal is a test of endurance, just as it always was. In July of 1468, the city of Bruges was the site of one of the most extravagant feasts of the Middle Ages. It was for the wedding of Charles the Bold, Duke of Burgundy, and Margaret of York, the sister of the English king. The celebrations lasted for 10 days. The main feast was not a 2-hour dinner. It was an all-day affair, a marathon of eating, drinking, and entertainment designed to display the immense wealth and power of the Duke of Burgundy. A guest at this feast, let's call him Sir John, an English knight in Margaret's retinue, would have needed serious stamina. He would enter the massive hall, which had been specially decorated for the occasion. The meal would not have a set start and end time in the way we think of it. It was a flowing event with multiple stages. It was divided into courses, but a medieval course was not a single plate of food. It was a wave of many different dishes brought out at once. The first course might consist of 20 different items: chicken pasties, venison stew, roasted swan, jellies, and elaborate salads. Sir John would not be expected to eat all of them. He would pick and choose from the dishes placed near him. After an hour or two, the tables would be cleared, and there would be a break for entertainment. An elaborate subtlety would be brought out. This was a huge, intricate sculpture made of sugar paste or wax. One of the subtleties at Margaret's wedding feast was a model of a castle with a mermaid in the moat. Another was a golden whale 60 feet long, with actors inside who performed a short play. After the entertainment, the second course would arrive. This would be another wave of 20 or 30 dishes, even more impressive than the first, perhaps roasted boar, peacocks, and fish dishes of incredible complexity. Sir John would eat some more, drink more wine, and watch more entertainment. This cycle would repeat 3, 4, or even 5 times. The entire event could last for 8 hours or more. This was not just about being well fed, it was a test. It was a way for the host to show he had the resources to provide an endless stream of food and entertainment. For the guests, it was a test of their social graces and their physical endurance. You had to know how to pace yourself, how to engage in conversation, and how to appreciate the spectacle over a very long period. Leaving early would be a grave insult. Our holiday dinners are, of course, on a much smaller scale, but they are often the longest meal we eat all year. We do not just sit down, eat, and leave. The holiday meal is an event that stretches over many hours. It has distinct phases, just like the medieval feast. First, there is the gathering phase. People arrive. They have drinks and appetizers. This can last for an hour or more. It is a time for conversation and catching up. This is the prelude to the main meal, a warm-up. Then, everyone is called to the table for the main course. This is the centerpiece of the day, the equivalent of the first 2 or 3 courses of the medieval feast. We eat the turkey, the stuffing, the potatoes. This part of the meal might last an hour or more. It is rarely rushed. After the main course, there is a distinct break. The table is cleared. People get up, stretch, move to a different room. This is the modern equivalent of the break for entertainment. Instead of a sugar castle, we might watch a football game, look at old family photos, or just sit and talk. This lull is an essential part of the marathon. It allows for digestion and prepares everyone for the next stage. Finally comes the dessert course. Pies, cakes, and coffee are served. This is the final wave of food, the voti of the medieval meal. The entire event, from the arrival of the first guest to the departure of the last, can easily span 5 or 6 hours. It is a test of our own social and physical endurance. We eat more than we normally would. We spend more concentrated time with our families than we normally would. The holiday meal is not a quick refueling. It is a long, multi-stage performance, an afternoon-long commitment. It is a faint but clear echo of the epic, day-long feasts designed to overwhelm the senses and test the stamina of the guests. Number 1, the fancy garnish on the platter is the last trace of edible art. The coronation of King Henry VI of England took place in 1429. He was only 8 years old. The feast that followed was designed to cement his authority and impress the powerful nobles of the realm. The cooks in the royal kitchen were tasked with creating a spectacle that would be remembered for decades. One of their most important jobs was the creation of the subtleties. A subtlety or subtlety was an elaborate sculptural showpiece that appeared between courses. It was the ancestor of our most elaborate cake decorations. These were not just pretty objects, they were political cartoons and allegories made from food. But one of the subtleties at Henry VI's feast was a sculpture of the young king flanked by Saint George and Saint Denis, representing the union of England and France under his rule. Another depicted the Virgin Mary with the baby Jesus. These were powerful statements of the king's divine right to rule and his political ambitions. The primary materials for these sculptures were sugar paste, marzipan, and wax. Sugar was still incredibly expensive, so a large sugar sculpture was a breathtaking display of wealth. A specialized team of artists, known as subtlety makers, would work for weeks on these creations. They would build wooden armatures and then meticulously sculpt the figures. They used natural food colorings to paint them: saffron for yellow, sandalwood for red, parsley for green. These subtleties were meant to be admired, discussed, and understood. They were a form of edible propaganda. They were carried into the Great Hall with great ceremony and presented to the high table. They were the climax of each course, the thing that made the feast more than just a meal. While they were technically edible, it is unlikely many people ate them. Their purpose was visual and symbolic. Another form of this food as art was the illusion food. Cooks delighted in making things that looked like something else. They would create meat dishes out of fish for Lent. They would mold jellies into the shape of animals or coats of arms. A famous illusion was the helmeted cock, where the top half of a roasted chicken was sewn onto the bottom half of a roasted suckling pig, creating a mythical beast. This was not just about being clever. It was about showing the skill and artistry of the cook and the worldliness of the host. It was a form of entertainment on a plate. Today, our holiday food is generally more straightforward. We want a turkey to look like a turkey, but the instinct to decorate, to present food in a special way is a direct legacy of the subtlety and the illusion food. Look at the way we garnish our holiday platters. We do not just put the turkey on a plate. We surround it with sprigs of parsley or rosemary, and we arrange glistening cranberries and slices of orange around it. We are dressing the plate. This is not for flavor. It is purely for visual appeal. It is a faint echo of the subtlety maker's art. Think of the other decorative touches. A pumpkin pie might have a lattice crust or leaves cut from pastry on top. A Christmas cake might be elaborately frosted to look like a wreath or a snowy landscape. We make gingerbread houses, which are literally edible sculptures created purely for show before they are eaten. So put a sprig of mint on a dessert. We sprinkle paprika over deviled eggs for color. All these little acts of decoration are the last remnants of a time when food was a medium for art and political messaging. We are not making grand statements about the union of two kingdoms, but we are still making a statement. We are saying that this meal is special. We are saying that we have put in extra effort, that this is not an everyday dinner. That small sprig of parsley next to the turkey is a direct humble descendant of the magnificent sugar castle that once graced a king's table. It is the last whisper of a tradition where the look of the food was just as important as its taste.